Welcome back to another video, guys. In this video, if you've clicked on it, you're probably trying to figure out how to fix the 4x4 system on your Polaris. So what I have here is a 2008 Polaris 500 HO Sportsman X2, but any Polaris Sportsman 500 will probably be pretty similar and common to this. So yeah, let me run you through what I did to fix the 4x4 system on this. This Polaris here came in with a 4x4 problem. The problem was it kept going in and out of 4x4 and it wasn't staying engaged. So right about here, I'll post a little photo of what the Polaris Sportsman service manual says to do, running through the procedure of testing for what component or where at in the circuit the 4x4 could be not working. So yeah, right here's the little form. I still have it up, hopefully. And yeah, just screenshot it or something, and you're gonna be using this to figure out why your 4x4 doesn't work. So I'm gonna make this simple, short, and sweet. So right here, our first test is speed readout okay. So it's basically saying, hey, does your speedometer work? And if it doesn't, that possibly could be a reason why your 4x4 doesn't work. And then now let's get into testing mainly. So now it wants you to turn your key switch on and put your transmission in gear, and then turn your all-wheel drive switch on. So to explain why they want it in gear is because right here, 4x4 only activates in high and low gear. It also activates in reverse when you have the override button pushed right over here, the yellow one. But one reason why your 4x4 may not be working is because your gear shifter here has its linkage go all the way to the back. And right here and back, here's your manual linkage, but here is a little position sensor thing that's made out of plastic. This, right up here, sends a signal to your speedometer screen, which mine's torn apart right now. But right here, your screen will project what gear you're in. So, say you're in high gear with the shifter, but the screen is reading neutral, your 4x4 isn't going to activate, even though your four-wheeler will still move because it's in high gear, because your shifter linkage, if you look in there, watch, when I move your shifter, it moves the transmission, and then this thing wouldn't be moving, so that would be the reason why your transmission is in a different gear than what your screen says. And so this controls your 4x4 switch, and it won't let your 4x4 switch turn on because your speedometer is hooked to your switch here to give it power when it's in the right gear. So that's one reason. Hopefully that's not confusing. So all you would have to do to fix your 4x4 then is to simply replace this little piece right here on your transmission. But say that wasn't the case, and it does work, so we say yes, the why. Go down to the next one. On hub coil connector, leave it connected, measure for 12 volts from brown, the white, to coil body ground. So there's going to be a 4-plug connector on your front gear case. You're going to leave that connector connected, and you're going to stick your prongs into it from your voltmeter and test it. I'll show you where that's located. So I'm up here on the right side of the four-wheeler. I've removed the tire, and if you come in right here, here's the 4-pin plug. You can't miss it. So for your all-wheel drive or 4x4 switch, it's going to be here. Let me get a light. Okay, so right here, these two middle wires are your 4x4 switch, and the two outside wires right here are your ADC all-wheel drive. So this is like your hill descent, the one that shuts off over 15 miles per hour. So yeah, you want to put the prongs in the two middle ones. So it doesn't matter which side you put the positive or negative, but just stick your leads right up into here while you have the key turned it in high or low gear and the 4x4 switch activated. You should have a 12-volt signal coming from right here. And I'll post up a little photo of what the service manual says right here also, so you can take a screenshot of that. And then another thing is, in that same plug I just showed you in the last clip, here's another thing you can screenshot right here of how to measure resistance in the magnetic field from the magnetic coil in the front hub. So when you turn your 4x4 on, it sends an electric signal to your front gearbox, and inside there's little coils that will be magnetized, and it will push these activate, I would call them like actuator plates together, and it will activate your 4x4 in the front. So those coils have a certain amount of resistance. So right here in this little thing I posted, if you screenshot it, it says it should be, I think, something like 22.7 or 8 ohms, all the way up to whatever the other measurement is. You want to put your voltmeter on ohms and stick it in the two middle prongs, just like you did for the voltage, the same location, the middle ones for the 4x4, and you should get right around that measurement. If you get anything lower than that, your coils are bad in your front hub, so your hub is actually not, your actuator plates are actually not pushing together in the gearbox and activating your 4x4 system. So that could be another problem that's mechanical if you don't have the right ohm reading in the front. So that's another thing to note. Now let's move on to the next step. Before we move on to the next step, just right over here, if you weren't to get it, it says it's not an instrument problem. So that means that this sucker right here is good on your thing. But it could be a switch or wiring problem. So that means maybe your switch is bad if you're not getting 12 volts down to the connector at the gearbox, because if you're not getting power down at the gearbox, that means somewhere between the gearbox and the switch it's shorting out and your circuit's not being complete. So that's why it could be the switch just not completing its circuit, or you could have a pinched wire somewhere or a broken wire somewhere in your system causing it not to send voltage down. But yeah, let's say you did have that and we moved on to the next step of how to do more tests. So leave switch on, turn key off, disconnect the 16-pin connector from cluster, turn key switch back on, check for 12 volts at the brown and white, and then to ground on the 4-pin plug down there, just like you did. You're going to do the same voltage test you just did down there on the same two wires, except this time on this housing, once you remove it, there's a 16 plug connector right here. You're going to have to unplug that sucker. So you just basically do the test with the cluster unplugged, and you should get 12 volts down there. If you don't, it's definitely a wiring problem if you don't. So yeah, then what you're basically gonna have to do is from that 4-pin plug down there at the gearbox, you're gonna have to check the wiring harness all the way up to this switch. So for me, on this four-wheeler, that's where I started to have a problem. I had a wiring problem, and I'll show you exactly why my 4x4 system didn't work on this one. So, like I said at the very beginning, this 4x4 system would activate in and out, and it would never really stay there. Like, if you turn the steering wheel or the handlebars or something, it would just activate in and out of 4x4 randomly. And when I diagnosed it, I was getting power down here, but it would turn on and off when moving the handlebars, which is like the weirdest thing in the world. So I was like, maybe there's a wire or something getting pinched in the handlebar system, and when I turn the handlebar a certain amount, it connects the wire, and when I pull it away, it disconnects the wire. And sure enough, started tearing this all apart, and I got to the main harness, removed all the electrical tape, and then I realized it wasn't even activating in the 4x4. And if you look right in here, let me zoom you in. and you see right in there those disconnected wires right off to the left. Well, that harness right there goes to the 4x4 switch. So this harness right here goes down to the main harness, and right before it does, there's all those cut wires. And I bet they're getting pinched when the handlebars were turning, making it tear the wires apart and then short the circuit. And I bet when the electrical tape was still wrapped around the wiring harness, it was holding the wires together so they'd still make contact every once in a while, making the 4x4 system randomly work and randomly not work. So definitely check your wiring harness, especially right around the handlebar area. Wires do get pinched and they do tear apart or short out. So that could possibly be a problem on your four-wheeler. But there's one more test that I want to do with you guys. The last test here is turn, switch off, reconnect cluster, leave headlight pod disassembled, shift to low or high, and leave all-wheel drive on. So if you come over here, if it was a yes, replace the instrument cluster. So replace this guy right here, and then if no, proceed to electrical all-wheel drive components if all-wheel problem persists. So another way to test the mechanical side is what I showed earlier with the ohm testing. Pretty darn simple. Like mine read right on spec, so I knew my mechanical side of things was good, and then obviously followed the diagram, and it led me to running into that wiring problem. So I hope this helped you guys figure out multiple ways to diagnose your 4x4 system on your Polaris. There's not a lot of videos out there, so I thought I would throw what I know to hopefully help you guys out with fixing your 4x4 system. And yeah, I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.